Hey, what's up, everyone? Getting a few things set up since it's been a minute since I streamed. Gotta check out what my paint scheme's gonna look like, but should be ready to go in just a minute. As soon as I find my mini. Ta-da! Let's see what we're painting today. This guy here. Vex from Critical Role. If you're a fan of the podcast, you'll recognize that character. If you're in there, if you could in the chat, let me know what my mic sounds like. It's been a very long time since I streamed anything. So yeah. Also, if you don't mind, if you'll share the link out to anyone that might be interested, that'd be awesome. Finally, if you're here paying attention, if you would, post a message in the chat, let me know you're there. I just want to make sure everything's working and running smoothly. I need a brush. Towel. Make sure all my windows are all set up so I can see everything that's going on. Because I'm sure, being as it's my first stream in a while, I'm going to end up painting off stream a little bit. Just checking out what colors this guy's supposed to be so that I know how to paint it. Be ready to go in just a minute. Alrighty. I think I'm ready to go. Good enough. So, how's everyone doing? We're going to go ahead and get started here. Pull down some paint colors that I need. Necromancer Cloak. Whoops. As I throw my paint, Dark Sky. All the paints I'm going to use today are made by the Army Painter. As you can tell, it's primarily what I use. Even got a big fancy map that says so. Angel Green. Angel Green. Gonna need some tanned flesh for a base tone. And some gunmetal. Excuse my camera while it shakes a bit. And we'll need some oak brown. I'm just throwing paint everywhere today. And some filthy cape. It's up here somewhere. Thought I had filthy cape. Just gotta remember what color that is. I haven't used it a lot. Ash gray. Filthy cape. Alright. So we're going to start with mixing up about a 50-50 mix of the Dark Sky and the Angel Green. So I'm going to throw these on my Vortex mixer. If you can hear that in the background, sorry. That's what that buzzing noise is. It is the easiest way for me to mix my paint, especially the ones that have been sitting on my desk for a while. They like to separate a bit. Alright, so that's the dark sky mixed up. And that's the angel green mixed up, so I'm just using my Army Painter wet palette here. And we're going to mix these together right on the palette. So about a 50-50 mix. It does not have to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Into my paint water. And get a brush I don't care about for mixing. And we're going to just give that a nice mix on the palette. So let me know how the sound is. Is the music too loud? Is my microphone loud enough? Just let me know. Like I said, it's been a while since I streamed anything. So we're going to use this cool little color that we've mixed up here. And that's going to be the color for his cloak. So I'm just going to take a nice large brush. It's going to take a couple coats here. And we're going to paint this over the whole thing. What I've done before this is I've taken my airbrush and I have zenithal primed everything. Because it helps me to see where your lights and shadows are going to go before I start painting the mini. And it has some impact on the finished product as well. So I like it. I do a 3-color zenithal and it works well for me. So we're just going to block in some rough colors here. We are going to use a wash on this guy today. Probably a couple different colors of wash actually, because we're just trying to get through these and make them look as good as possible for one of my customers and probably my longest time customer that I've had. I've had some requests to live stream again, so here we are. And alright, so that color's done for now. Next we're going to go into Necromancer's Cloak, which I already have on my palette up here. The nice thing about this Army Painter wet palette is that it keeps paint nice and wet for a couple of days. So we're going to go right into that. And this is going to be his cloth and his boots. So pretty much everywhere that is not the cloak. If you would, if you're just joining us, if you'll drop a message in the chat, let me know you're here. I love to interact with my viewers. I'm hoping that this takes back off again. I like that color that came out with the 50-50 mix of the angel green and the dark sky. I missed a spot, but it's going to take another coat to get that to where I want it anyways. And we're just going to take this all the way down the legs. So again, we're painting Vax from Critical Role, if you're familiar with their podcast. I was not until this customer sent me all these minis to paint a while back, and I started listening to it. And lately, if I'm not live streaming, I'm listening to their podcast to try to catch up, because I'm going to let you in a little secret. I'm only like 8 episodes into the first campaign. I know I'm way behind. It's good so far. I'm enjoying it. I've got a couple of live play RPG campaigns that I like listening to. You have Critical Role. I really enjoy the Adventure Zone. But they don't have minis for me to paint with the McElroys. Alright, so rinse my brush off there. And we're going to go back into this 50-50 Dark Angel, or excuse me, Angel Green and Dark Sky. And we're going to give it a second coat on this cloak. Want to really make sure we have good coverage there. Cover all that in. Get down in between the legs. I'm using a fairly large brush here. For base coating, that's easier for me, is to use the large brush. So, and then we're going to grab his hair with the Necromancer Cloak, because I think he's got dark hair. It's been a minute since I live streamed, so I'm trying to get back in the groove of live streaming and talking while I paint. But I'm not doing any special technique teaching today. I'll talk about what colors I use. But if you have any questions, I'll answer any questions. Happy to chat with you. So we got the hair, and I realized I missed the hood on his jacket. Cloak thing, whatever it's called. And I missed a couple other spots. So, alright. Let's get that brush cleaned off. And next we'll go into some oak brown, which I already have on my palette. It's separated a little bit, so we'll get it a little cleaned up here. Mix it back together. Alright, so we're going to get all the leather with this. Oops. Again, I'm just using a large size 2 brush to get a base coat on. Alright, that's getting a little iffy. We'll let that dry for a minute. We'll get these areas up here. I feel like I'm talking to myself, with nobody talking in the chat. If you are talking in the chat, I'm not seeing it, so hopefully y'all can hear me. We're going to get his gloves. And this will take a couple coats here. Part of it's because my paint separated on my palette, but I don't want to waste it, so it's still salvageable. We can make it work. Alright, so while that's done, mix up my tan flesh real quick over here. Hey, Shep. Just getting started on him. It'll be a couple hours before he's finished. I'll have a photo for you by the time you wake up. I am going to switch to a bit of a smaller brush here. And start putting some tanned flesh onto his face. Yeah, I've been painting up quite a few of these Critical Role minis for my buddy Shep in there, Shep Talk, who runs a pretty cool movie review channel and unboxing channel, kind of a pop culture channel is almost what I would call it. With the delay, I'm not sure if you're still there, but if you're still there, yeah, it's a kind of a pop culture channel. Check it out if you get a chance. He does some cool stuff. He's an awesome guy. Gives away, or used to. I know he gives away movies sometimes. His painter's never won one. Alright. Get some gunmetal gray going here, or gunmetal metallic. Try to be conservative with your paints. A quick little money-saving tip. I see a lot of people will squeeze out a boatload of paint on their palettes. I'm guilty of it sometimes too. When in reality, you're going to need about a quarter of what you probably think you will. And the rest of it's just going to go to waste. So, be conservative. Cool, man. If you're just finding me, because I posted out some links in some random groups that I've never posted before, glad to have you. If you like what you see, I've got a ton of videos on my channel. And some of my stuff is also over on the Fifth Trooper Network, as I am a part of their content creation group. So you can find some of my shorter guides on there. I'm thinking that my live streams I'll stick to this channel, and then my tutorials that are, you know, just a 10 to 15 minute video of how to paint are going to go over there. Catch you later, Shep. Have a good night. So I'm kind of all over the place on this mini right now, being more scattered than usual as I get back in the hang of painting and streaming. Normally I try to complete all of one color before switching to another, and I'm not doing that. So, but we're still working on just base coats here. Guys, if you like what you see, subscribe to the channel, please, and give this a thumbs up. And then if you want to be notified of when I go live, if I continue doing this, we'll see how the reception is of this. But if you want to be notified of when I do go live or put out a new video via this channel, make sure you hit the bell icon, and you'll get a nice little notification whenever I go live or put out a new video. Honestly, I'm not going to talk a lot about COVID, but COVID has impacted my production schedule, and so it's finally starting to lighten up a little bit for me. Let's get this Filthy Cape mixed up real well. It's not a color I use very often, so you'll probably hear my Vortex mixer in the background for a minute. Anyways, so I work in the healthcare field by day, and so COVID has been a little bit tough on me there, but you know, it is what it is. We're all getting through it. We're all in it together. I'm not going to talk politics on this channel though, just that's why. Alright, so this Filthy Cape is a nice grayish with a slight brown hue, it looks like. Very light tan hue. Nothing too crazy. So we'll grab some of that. It's got a bit of fur right here. Let me scoot my chair over a little bit so that I'm being on stream. I'm a bigger guy, so sometimes my chair doesn't like to move on the carpet, even with a rolling mat under it. I'm not near in the shape I used to be when I was in the old military. Hey Dan, thanks for stopping by. I have plenty of footage shot to make videos that are pre-produced, but I figured I'd give the streaming a go again. Just touching up some areas that I missed before. Contemplating whether I want to try giving this cloak one more coat, and I do. With the 50-50 mix of dark sky and angel green, which made a nice, I don't know, teal. I don't know what the name of all these colors are, especially once I've mixed them. I can tell you what the colors of the paints are that I'm using, but if I have to name my own colors, we're just going to leave that there. How are my mic levels and the sound levels? Are they acceptable? All right. Looks like we got most of a base coat on there. Just looking for anywhere I may have missed. Great. Not too quiet, not too loud. I need to figure out... So I use pretzel.rocks for my streaming, and they have a desktop app which allows me to print the song title down into a text file that shows up in the bottom left, but I'm having some issues logging into the app, so I'm having to use the website, and it won't do that. Oops, I missed some flesh. So... get this flesh right in here. And I boo-booed, so we'll have to go back and clean up some of the brown and the black. Eek. Spot's a little bit tighter than I want it to be, so we will grab this smaller brush. Probably should have done the flesh first. So the funniest thing happened the other day. I haven't streamed in a long time, and I got a message that somebody had posted a comment on one of my old stream videos. I think of the bark speeder that I did for Star Wars Legion. And it was the first actual negative comment that I've had. And all they did was post ugly. And I was like, thanks for the constructive feedback. The comment's gone now. I don't know what happened to it, but maybe they meant it for somebody else's channel and put it on mine. It was just odd that I haven't streamed in a long time and I get a random message. I'm trying to decide, I think this is leather and not fur, and I initially painted it the fur color, which was that filthy cape color. Yeah, that looks better like that. Okay. Thiago, I hope I pronounced your name right. What brand of paints are you using? In order for me to help answer that question, I've got to know what brand of paints you're using, and if it's anything other than P3, Army Painter, or Citadel, I probably won't be able to help you too much with it. I've used very little bit of Reaper. Army Painter. Okay. Let me see something. Hang on a second. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. I think this one will work. Alright, so this is a brand new bottle of Dragon Red. I've not opened it yet. I'm not sure if it'll work because I store my paint upside down in my paint drawer. But when you first get it, odds are it's not mixed very well, and as you can see, it's spreading real easily on this paper towel. It's actually really thin paint compared to my very well used, let me find it, my very well used bottle of Dragon Red. When I squeeze it out of the bottle, when I get some out, bear with me, this is why I have a new bottle of it. Notice how it doesn't soak into the paper towel like the other one does. So this is the new one. It's still holding its shape, and these just soaked right in. When you first get the paint, there's going to be some separated medium in there. Make sure you take some of that and squeeze it off the top. Quite a bit, actually. And it's going to be real thin. I know it seems like you're wasting paint. A little bit of color may come out. It doesn't take a whole lot. And then, if you don't have any, get some steel ball bearings. Pop the lid off of your new bottle. All you have to do is grab the tip, and it should come off just like that. Take 2 of these, drop it in your bottle, put the cap back on, and then shake the tar out of it. I don't know if you can hear that on my mic. If you don't have a mixer like I do, shake them by hand for a good couple minutes, and I'll show you what just that little bit will do for the paint consistency without me using my Vortex mixer. I have a Vortex shaker, works great, but it's probably because your paints aren't shooken well enough. It's a common complaint with Army Painter is that they can provide poor coverage. Now, red's probably not the best color for me to use this example for because they provide poor coverage in general, but I am here, I'm shaking paint. And you might be able to hear it in the background. But even with just that little bit, it's holding its tone better. But if I really gave it a good shake on my Army or on my Vortex mixer, especially new bottles just require you shake the tar out of them. If I give it a good shake over there, you may be skimping on the shaking, yeah. And squeezing out some of the medium first is really important when you first get the bottle. It's actually on a piece of paper as an instruction when you get their kits. It says to make sure you squeeze out some of the medium they use to top the bottle off. So it's much thicker. It's still spreading a little bit. It still could use some shaking, but these spread real quick, and that's holding a nice little pile. And so it really, when you think it's shooken or shaken or whatever the term is for it, make sure you shake it just a little bit more. Hopefully that helps. If not, shoot me a message on my page, and I'll try to help you out some more. Let me get a new paper towel, since I squeeze paint all over my cleaning one. All right, that was a perfect time for that question because it gave me time to let all my layers dry here on Vax. And then we will go to our next layer. So, I'll put these back. was just checking something before I put everything away. All right. Now I need some... I'm going to need that dark sky color again. Where did I just put it? There it is. Dark sky. Let's go with some dark stone for our black areas. I need the oak brown again for my leather, but I also need a little bit of monster brown to lighten it with. And banshee brown for my fur. Alright. So first things first, we're gonna squeeze out some of this dark sky. The mixer I was talking about, Thiago, I don't know, it just fell, but whatever. I have a Lab Genius Vortex mixer. Works a charm. They're pricey, but I don't know if you can see on video. They're not super loud. It sounds lighter on here than it is, but it basically does that with the paint bottles. I think my wife got me this one for Christmas for like 70 bucks, but that's cheaper than the medical bill for a tennis elbow from shaking your paints too much. All right, so we're going to squeeze some of this dark sky out. Thin it just a little bit. I really like this dark sky color. It's a nice deep blue. It does typically take a couple of coats to cover, but all right. So we're gonna focus on our ridge highlights here. This is just a basic highlight, and what I found is that if you're going to use a wash, doing one layer of highlights first helps your wash out a little bit. So I've started doing that. And this is going to go on brighter than it initially appears, so don't freak out. And when we wash it, it'll all come together, I promise. And I'm just doing some very rough highlights, nothing too fancy. I have no idea what this music is. But apparently it said something about Nicolas Cage on a sequin pillow. Alright. Oh, I forgot my metallic highlight. Let's grab that. We're going to get that out of the way. It's a plate metal. Yeah, it really is a wrist saver, so if you can get your hands on one or save up for one, I would recommend highly that you save up for some kind of mixer like that. It's been a game changer for me. So we're going to focus on the blade edge here. We want that to be a little bit more shiny than everything else. And a little bit there, not much. All right. And we need Barbarian Flesh for our skin. Oh man, I just stuck my hand into some paint that I had wiped off. Usually by the time I'm done painting, I'm more paint on my hands than on the palette. Almost forgot to mix it. Once you get them mixed the first time, Thiago, they don't take a whole lot to get remixed unless you let them set for weeks. Like I've got some paints, I just don't use some of my colors as frequently as others. And so they require mixing more frequently when I use them. But like all my flesh tones get used a lot. I find myself painting with a lot of blues and purples. They're just colors I enjoy. So this is a Barbarian Flesh, and we're gonna do a first layer of highlights here on just the upturn stuff. most of the face, leaving just a slight dark edge around his hairline. Now the thing about these Critical Role minis is their faces are tiny, 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 so it's really hard to get a whole lot of detail on them. Alright, Banshee Brown. This is a newer color for me, so it's going to require a little bit of shaking. If y'all haven't, I'm going to say it again. Please hit that like button and the subscribe button. If you'd like to see more of my stuff, helps me know what y'all want to see. I'm kind of an eclectic paint channel. I'll paint just about anything. A lot of Star Wars Legion stuff, but I've been branching out more. I just bought a bunch of Wild West Exodus stuff, so that should be coming soon. So just picking out some highlights here on the fur on his coat. He's got some fur accents. You don't want to cover the whole thing. All right. And then put some light oak brown on here. I think it's just about time for me to get a new bottle of it out. I think it's, you can hear it's pretty empty. But I like to get every last drop out of my paint bottles before I get rid of them. I did shake some paint onto my paper towel, which means that I'll probably dip my hand in it. Something I'm good at. And some Monster Brown that I'm going to mix the two roughly 50-50. There is an Army Painter color that's kind of in between these two that I don't have, called Dirt Spatter. You would think I'd have their entire range, but I don't. I need to get it because I'm slowly adding all this stuff to my paint lines. All right, so thin it out a little bit, and we're going to highlight our leather with this. So that's going to be all of our gloves. And we're being pretty generous with these highlights here. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I will answer them as I can. Even with a quick demonstration if I need to. I enjoy helping people improve their paint hobbies. Alright, get some dark stone on the palette here. And remember, less paint on your palette is going to save it. For what I'm doing in this method, Thiago, yes. Because I'm going to go and wash everything. So this is kind of just to give it a, brighten my base colors a little bit. We're going to come back and do some more highlighting after I wash and they dry. I'm using a little bit different technique than I have been in the past on these models a lot to do with because they're so small. They're more closer to what I would call true 28mm scale rather than heroic. So heroic would be the things like your Warhammer 40k where it's 28mm, kinda. So yeah, I would cover most of your upturned areas, and I'm just touching up a spot. Most of your upturned areas, everything that's basically facing straight up should be brighter. Alright, so my dark stone. Now this dark stone is going to highlight all of our black areas except for the hair, and it is going to cover nearly everything. All right, dark stone. So this, we're going to be pretty generous with this. And just leave the deepest recesses. Because once we wash it with a dark tone wash, I think is what I'm going to end up using, it will make it look dark again. So anything that faces the ground, I'm definitely not putting it on, but we'll cover most of the rest of it. But anything that's mostly parallel with the ground is going to get it on this one, on this pass. And definitely everything upturned. Not parallel, perpendicular to the ground is the word I was looking for. It is late where I'm at. This dark stone is going to go on looking really brown, but when you when it dries, it's going to lighten up a bit. Or, sorry, darken up a bit. Especially with that black undertone. And I'm not really paying a whole lot of detail to, or paying a whole lot of attention to detail lines right now. We're just trying to get our base tone brightened up a little bit. Of course, you can use whatever colors you want. I'm trying to stick to a pretty traditional paint scheme for these guys, based on what my understanding of their characters are in the Critical Role world, Vox Machina. So a new adjustment for me since the last time I've streamed, I have to wear glasses now. And so it's been a challenge learning how to paint with glasses on. And right before I had found out I needed glasses, I bought like one of those magnifying headsets that like jewelers use to try to, not to correct my vision, but to try to help on my fine detail. And I can't actually wear them with my glasses, so I never got to learn how to use them very well. All right. I think that's most everything there. I may actually come back with another of this lighter brown tone and go over some of the leather again because it darkened a bit. I don't have a Patreon, Thiago, but the Fifth Trooper does, and I'm a part of them. So if you look up the Fifth Trooper Network, they have a Patreon, and I get a lot of my support through them. I've thought about setting up a Patreon, but really I'm a part of their group. So if you feel like helping us out, look up the Fifth Trooper Network, and just, I don't know if you can comment on there, just put that you found them through my paint videos, and they'll make sure that it comes back to help me out some. I looked into doing a Patreon at one point. I just don't have anything. I don't have anything to offer subscribers every month. Like, I don't want to do private videos because I want everyone to be able to get help from what I've done. Here's where we're at so far. So I've kind of just stood off from doing a Patreon. But they offer stuff. They have generic Patreon levels for gaming in general. You get some cool tokens out of it and swag and some other things. And go over there if you want to support a Patreon, because that, like I said, that money kicks back down to me. I can see if I can find it real quick. Just letting paint dry for a second before I get my washes up. I don't know who that other guy is with the Patreon. I hear there's some guy making terrain with a Patreon. I think his name's like Dan Wolf or something. I can grab a link to his Patreon here in a minute and stick it up there. And I know if you have a 3D printer and you like STL files for different things, he makes some pretty cool stuff. I've printed many of his STLs and painted some of them. I've got some super secret projects of his that I've got on my paint shelf behind me. Just picking off some dried wash. So I don't put wash on my wet palette. It soaks right through. Because the wet palette's designed to let water through, and wash is very thin. So Dan Wolf here in the chat, he's a super secret, like top secret stuff. I mean, I could sneak peek a piece that won't give anything away that's sitting here. But I'd have to get permission from the guy that made the files. So I just have this cheapy palette for putting washes in. Works great. Alright, so let me put these paints away. What's the audience think? Do they want to see a piece of terrain that I've completed out of a super secret project? It's a small piece. All 4 of my viewers right now. Oh, I'm sorry, Thiago. I think they ship outside the US, maybe? Question mark. I can ask. Give me a second. Alright, now that I got all my paints away, I need a dark tone. I think I'll use a soft tone and a strong tone. So dark tone, soft tone, strong tone. So we'll get a dark tone squeezed right there. Grab my brush. And we're going to cover most of this mini with dark tone. Oh, I meant to thin it first. Whoops. That's okay. Fixable. Just a drop or two. We don't want it too thin. And we're going to apply this fairly liberally to everywhere that's not brown. Just make sure it's not pooling up too heavily in the recesses. Otherwise you'll get odd looking wash pools. Trying to get my lighting adjusted for streaming still. Do you already have any ideas for, if I did a Patreon, what kind of rewards you'd like to see on there? Because that was my struggle, was I wanted it to make it worth people's while if they signed up for something. Again, just going with a real liberal wash here. Picking out some of the recesses that are pooling. I'm assuming that yep was in response to wanting to see some super secret terrain projects. If Dan okays it and says that I can share the project, I'll let him do that, and then looking more for a painting sensei, huh? Well, I do have quite a few videos on my channel. And most of them have techniques mixed in, while it may say, hey, here's how to paint clone troopers or something. I'm going to talk about generally how I paint white minis in general. So I tend to try to pick models that I can show a new technique on when I'm painting. What I'm doing here is strong tone onto my leather surfaces and the fur. So you'll notice what I do is I tend to apply a heavy coat of the wash in a couple places. And then I dry my brush off on a paper towel and come back and pick up anything that's pooling. Painting is really something that just takes a while to practice, honestly. Like, I missed a spot up under here with the dark tone. I've been painting about 12 years now, and I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There's still painters out there that I envy, but I've reached a level that I'm happy with, but I still learn every day, and strive to try new techniques. So recently I was on a kick where I was going to paint my minis using no washes. And I did that for a long time. And I still do. So, give me a second and I'll show you something on stream. If you don't follow my page, I need to apply a soft tone. And I'm going to need to let this guy dry for a minute. So I'm putting soft tone on the flesh areas. You could use a flesh wash if you want. I have both. Yeah, I've seen the PDF route in Tuition. Honestly, my struggle is that I have a commitment to videos for the Fifth Trooper Network also. And so I don't want to start anything that would cause me to not be able to uphold my agreement with them. So, all right. This guy needs to dry for a minute. I'm going to show you one of my fastest tricks to getting washes to dry. Set this aside. In order to do so, I'm going to have to mute my mic, so I'm going to go silent for just a minute. Well, I needed to tell you what my secret is. It's a really tried and true secret, and it's a hairdryer. Hairdryer on high, dries paint real quick. I'll be right back on mic in just a second. Wash is dry. All the way around. Hairdryer worse. Anyways, I was talking about wash. Let me grab a project I worked on just the other night that had 0 wash on it. And something, 0 wash on this and something, why I've been practicing the 0 wash technique. Not just for this model, but if you follow my Facebook, you probably saw this tank. It's too big for my camera. So that's part of the reason I decided not to paint it on stream, because it doesn't fit. The thing's massive in comparison, but this has no wash on it. It's all dry brush and streaking and airbrush and all kinds of things. Yeah, if you... Sorry, I was looking away from my camera. If you stop at the right here, this mini is going to be very flat. Because the shadows don't work without a highlight. The shadows don't show up without a highlight. So by washing, you're adding shadows, but no highlights. If you are going to stop at this wash step right here, you really need to do an extra highlight like I did before. So you've got to do your brights after. The biggest thing that people struggle with after their after their wash is they don't thin their highlights enough, so they get really stark contrast. Like, you get dark right against light. You really need to thin your highlights just about another, I don't know, another third. It's really a touch thing, and I know people hate it when painters say that, but it really is just a practice. Grab an old model that you don't care about, that you can strip over and over and over again in like some isopropyl alcohol or simple green or something like that, and really just practice getting some brights and highlights on there. It could even just be a piece of texture plastic that you've primed. I've seen people practice on the back of a spoon, but you really have to do both, the washes and the highlights. Otherwise, it doesn't turn out right. All right, so we're gonna go with some Castle Gray. Leather brown. That's monster brown. Whoops. No, we're not. We're gonna just use some of the monster brown for my leather highlights. I don't know what that emoji is supposed to be, Thiago, but there it is. Elven Flesh. Shining Silver. Cultist Robe. And Skeleton Bone. And Wolf Grey. Which Wolf Grey is actually blue. So, we're going to start with our largest area highlights, which is going to be our Castle Grey, right onto some of the edges. So this is going to be a much smaller highlight than our last one. We're just going to use it to pick out some edges and pops and colors. So, Castle Grey. So I'm using a real small, it's an Army Painter, it's my stuff started chipping off, but it's Army Painter Kolinsky Masterclass. It's a fine tip. This is what I use for my highlighting on these minis. Oh, is it a YouTube thumbs up? In my screen, it looks like a little yellow dude doing something. I don't know. I can't see it. So we're going to be kind of selective with this and just pick out some of our edges that we want to really have it look better and some of the tops of our armor. Don't do too much on this highlight. I messed up, so while it was still wet, I used my thumb to wipe it off. And if I don't like the way this is blending, I can thin down some of my base coat and lighten it up a little, or cover it up a little bit later. But make sure it dries first before you do any of that, because you gotta remember your colors are gonna dry darker than they appear. And so when you first put it on, a lot of times you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, that's really a stark highlight. And it might be until it dries. And I'm just picking out the wrinkles and stuff. Okay. I have my chat box real small, so I can't see it very well. So I did mess up here on his boot. I put way too much of a highlight. No, I'm not using the base colors. So this is Castle Grey. I didn't use Castle Grey at all. It's one step lighter than the Darkstone. And remember, you're thinning it down a little bit more. You can highlight with the base colors if you want to do multiple steps of highlights. I'm not trying to do that on this mini, so this might be my only step of highlight after a wash, depending on how it looks, if I'm happy with it. But it really is more of an edge highlight here than anything else. So I maybe am doing the top upturn 10% or so. And making sure to get all of my edges. Really focus on any edges that are popped out. I overdid it on this spot too. I don't like it. So we'll cover it back up with the dark stone. This is where you're going to focus on those upturned areas only. And on the hood here. This character, the colors are more muted because he's a rogue, so he's going to be darker in general. But you can still get some depth of color out of him. And it really takes practice to just figure out where to put your highlights at. When you're doing edge highlighting only, it's pretty obvious you do the edges. But if you're trying to add color elsewhere, it just takes practice. And if you don't like it, go back over it with your base tone. As long as you don't get the deepest recesses with your base tone, you're not going to mess up your wash at all. And it may actually add an extra layer of color. Okay, so I like that better now that I fixed it. All right. I think I'm done with that color. So let's go onto the cloak. We're going to use some of this wolf gray. And I'm going to mix it with the dark sky. Otherwise, this wolf gray is going to be too stark of a highlight there. And this is not a color I use very often either, so it's going to take a bit of a mix. You don't need much. Save your paint money. Grab some of my dark blue here. Pull it over here. And probably a 50-50 mix. No, much less than a 50-50 mix. That's much brighter than I wanted it. So maybe a 2-to-1 mix. Yeah, that's better. A 2-to-1 mix. If you're following my exact paint colors, but you don't have to. And we're going to make sure you thin it out decently. It's pretty thin if you can see it on my fingernail. Somewhat transparent almost. That's what you want for your wash, because you can always add more, but it's harder to take away once you've got colors going. And I'm just going to hit the upturned part of our ridges here. We're just trying to give it some depth of color. So Dan, I know how you found my channel. We are good friends. Thiago, how'd you find my channel? Alright, get some of this in here. Get the tops of these little panels that turn up. Great. Alright, so I'm going to go into this pure Monster Brown for my leather highlights. It's brighter than what I anticipated, but that's because I used a little bit of brighter initial highlight. So the nice thing about leather highlights is you can make them kind of messy, and it makes it look like scratched up leather. So there's a really big edge that runs his shoulder pad there. Make sure you get that. Get a little bit of color up there on this shoulder pad up here. And try to pick out the waves in there. Okay. And then Skeleton Bone. One of my favorite army painter colors in general. I squeezed out more than I wanted to, but hey. One of my only issues with the stainless steel ball bearings in the bottles is that sometimes they'll clog the nozzle, and you have to shake it a little bit to get it out. So we're going to get the fur with the skeleton bone. Just some really fine highlights here on this. Take your time, go slow. You'll notice if I feel like I'm uncomfortable with a certain area, you'll notice me kind of move the brush in the right next to it, in the area right before I apply the brush to get a few practice strokes in. Because it kind of, then you build some muscle memory, and then you slowly move in until you actually touch it on the area that you want painted. And it works well. Alright, let's go with my shining silver for my daggers. This is not a color I use very often either. And we're going to get this right here on just this blade. I squeezed out way too much for what I need to. And then Cultist Robe is going to be our hair highlights. I know it's a green color. Found it through Facebook. Okay. On my Facebook page, or did you find like the link that I shared somewhere? Actually, before I do that, I really want to go back with this blue again and do a little bit more highlight color. It dried darker than I anticipated, so. Oh, cool. I am sponsored by Army Painter, for full disclosure. I get all of my product from them. There's only one brush I use regularly that is an Army Painter. And I need to mellow out some of this arm highlight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my dark stone and thin it. You know, Citadel's too expensive for me. I'm cheap. And when I started getting serious about painting, I started with Army Painter because it was cheap. And I did a ton of research. And the Army Painter kit got a lot of mixed reviews. And then I found a channel, I think it was on Luke's APS or something like that. It's a channel I like a lot. Talking about how most people's problems with Army Painter are because they don't mix it enough. And sure enough, that's what I found with mine. Picking up some more Castle Gray highlights here on the chest. As I can see, I missed a little bit. Alright, so our last color for highlight is going to be Elven Flesh. I have some on my palette, but it's dried out. So actually, before I do that, there were a couple metal rings that I wanted to paint metallic before I forget. He's got a couple of like rings on his pants. What are we, an hour and 15 minutes into this guy and we're almost done. Tools are important. Oh, I forgot his hair highlights. Practice. Practice is what's gonna help you get the results that you're desiring. I don't claim to be a world-class masterclass painter. There's definitely better painters than I, but I have learned that you can use whatever tools you want, and you just have to know how to use the tools. Alright, so this is Cultist Robe. It's a really mucky green, but it actually highlights black hair really well. Surprisingly. because it's very transparent to begin with. So hair is something I always struggle with highlighting because I struggle to get really fine lines on there. So hair's not something I do well at. The other thing I've given up doing on these miniatures is pumpkin time. Good night, Dan. I'm not doing eyes. So the issue with these minis is their eyes are just way too tiny. I did eyes on one, and that was on the Grog Strongjaw. So what I am doing is I'm just painting a little bit of black in there to simulate eyes. If y'all haven't, check out Dan Wolf. He has a Patreon. Search him up. Dan, if you're still here, he may have left. If you are into STL printed file or printable STL files for terrain, he's got a ton of great stuff on there. He sells bases through the 5th Trooper Network website. Some STL files for bases for Star Wars Legion. I printed these on my resin printer. He printed this on his regular printer. They look great, easy to paint. Can't say enough good stuff about that. Not just because Dan's a good buddy of mine and we have been friends for a couple years now, but he really is genuinely a good person. So never use Cultist Green, huh? Works well. Cultist Robe's too yellow. It dries darker than it looks. Called it, said I would stick my hand in some paint, and I did. Alright, so Elven Flesh highlight. Flesh highlights are real important to get real thin. And we're going to hit the cheekbone with this. Like I said, these faces are so tiny that you have to be selective with your highlights. The jawline. Cheekbones. And I probably can't get a very good image of this on my camera because it's so small. Oh, messed up. Wet your brush if you mess up. I do it with my mouth. And just take the paint off while it's still wet. And I'll probably go back with a little bit of my dark tone and just darken up a couple areas that I overshot highlights on. Usually the faces I'm used to working with are just a touch brighter. And so, or not brighter, larger. So I can be a little more generous with my highlights there, but these faces are tiny, tiny, tiny. Well, as you can see, you can stop at this point with this mini if you wanted to. It's probably where I'm going to stop as well. And you've got, if you follow what I did, you've got a mini painted in an hour and a half. There's a couple spots I want to brighten up, just specific colors. So I'll mix in some of my Castle Gray into my Monster Brown. And just pick out some of this leather a little bit. Be very picky with it. just some very select spot highlights. Make a couple things pop. All right. I'm going to grab some more of my Necromancer Cloak and just make the hair darken in some areas where I always shot with my washes or my highlights, just to put some streaks back in. All right. Oh, you don't use Elven Flesh? It's a great, very small spot highlight, so I use it very sparingly. Very sparingly. It's definitely for like touch highlights, is what I call them, where you're just touching an area with it. So if you'll notice, like when I'm applying this Elven Flesh, I'm not even really moving my brush, I'm just kind of touching it into the spot I want it. It's for very unique highlights. If you want things to pop, you've really got to push some of your contrast, which means you've got to go real bright in some areas and darken some others. So when you hear somebody say it needs more contrast, it means your darkers need to be darker and your lights need to be lighter. And one trick to figure out how well you're doing with that is to set your mini up and take a black and white picture of it, or take a picture of it and set it to grayscale on your phone. And if it just looks like one blah image that's all like the same color gray, then your colors aren't bright enough. And your darks aren't dark enough. Should the paint run? When I am doing highlights, I like it to be somewhat transparent when I paint it on my thumbnail. So if you look here, I know it's out of focus because I don't have autofocus on, but when I paint it on my thumbnail, it's mostly transparent. A lot of that depends on how heavily you apply your colors. If you like push really heavy, then you want lighter paints. It really, again, it's something that you just got to practice with. Every painter has their own preference on how their paint should function. It's what you get used to. When I'm highlighting, I prefer to work with more of a glaze consistency, because then I make sure that the colors I want are still coming through. So I'm applying an extra highlight step that I didn't plan on, which is more of that wolf gray into the dark sky. That was not in my plans when I started this highlighting step, but I didn't like the lack of color I had going on. Especially on the blue. That made it pop more. Great. All right. So the last thing I'm going to do here is going to tie it all together, believe it or not. And I'm just going to take some plain old craft black, just a cheap craft paint, and grab my brush and some paint water, thin it right in the little cup, and paint my base. And the very last step I would do when I get off is apply a matte varnish. I'm not going to do it on here because I spray it through my airbrush and my airbrush is loud. But I can turn my mic off, I guess. But the compressor has to kick on and it's loud. Once this paint all dries, I spray a matte varnish because the washes are very gloss, especially the army painter washes, and they look odd. until there's gloss on there. I said last step, I lied. I want to do a finishing step here. And I realized I messed something up. This is supposed to be a dagger, not a sheath. So, problem solved. We painted it metallic. But we're going to get a little bit of a glow going on this dagger here. So I'm going to take some dragon red that we had talked about. And we're going to paint a jagged design onto this blade. Some of the reference photos I saw online had this going on there. And I liked it, so we're doing that. And I'm painting it all the way down the blade here. And then I'm just randomly doing a real rough red color down the blade. And then we're going to take some of this Cultist Robe that we used. And the other one is a poison dagger, if I recall. So we're going to run a line of that right down the center of that blade. And then while that's drying, grab some pure red to highlight our other red with. I may try to go back and put eyes on this guy. We will see. I'm afraid I'll mess it up because it's so small. Grab just a little bit of pure red, and we'll do some pure red highlights. Very selective highlights. And then, for the other green glow, poison glow, I'm going to use jungle green. And I'll leave that a little bit thicker than I normally would, so I'm actually just going to use it straight out of the bottle. Get a little fine bit on my brush, and I want to run just a real fine line down the center of that Cultist Robe. You may need just a touch of water, because if it's too thick, it won't apply. But it's definitely thicker than what I normally would work with. And a real fine line down the center of that Cultist Robe down the dagger. You probably can't even see the line I did there. Alright. So that really brought that model together. Give me a second and I'll see if I can't get this camera so I can get a closer up shot of what's going on here. Too close. Now there's a lot of gloss going on from the wash. I also didn't paint the underside of the dagger, so I forgot that. I'm not going to highlight that red at all. We'll just leave it darker red. But hopefully that's a better view for you on how I did my darks and highlights going on there. All right, let me get it zoomed out. And then we need to apply another coat of this black. The craft black doesn't like to cover very well when it's thinned. Thiago, do you use a wet palette by chance? If you don't use a wet palette with Army Painter paints, I would highly, highly suggest go ahead and getting one. They're cheap, about $25 US. Army Painter has their own. That's what I'm using here. Up in the corner. It's kind of cool. It has a lid that goes on it, and a spot for your brushes in there, and it has a little red strap that wraps around it if you wanted it for transport. So when I'm leaving it on my desk, I don't put the strap on it. It just sits off to the side. So I'm going to kill my microphone for a minute after I put my paint away, and I'm going to get my matte varnish ready to spray out of my airbrush. It's not something I typically spray on. I don't usually airbrush on video, but what the heck. This paint went much quicker than I anticipated it, so we will do that. If I'm silent for a minute, it's because I don't want to overblast your ears with my air compressor. So I'll be back on mic in just a minute. Alright, so what I did was I sprayed some matte varnish through my airbrush, hit it with a hairdryer to dry it, And let's see here. Matte varnish really helps to kill some of that shine off of it. And really just kind of makes the miniature pop. Again, I'm not going for show quality minis here. I'm going for minis that are going to look good at about 3 feet away on the table when you're playing with them. So that's what we've got here. Contemplating, do I try to do that eye that I was talking about? And I think I'm going to. It won't be a difficult thing for right now. So, free tutorial on how I do eyes. Army Painter Insane Detail Brush. Really fine tip. This isn't going to matter that I varnished it first. On my palette, I have a little bit of Spaceship exterior. It's what I use for eyes. Now, the eyes are going to require a little bit of touch-up. They always do. But here's my tip for 28mm eyes. Get your brush and touch the whites of your eyes into the eye socket. If you go over, it's okay. Normally I would do this before highlighting, but I'm going to be able to clean it up, so it's fine. I'm going to intentionally have an out of focus camera here for just a minute so I can get close-ups of what I'm doing. So I put whites in the eye socket. Then I'm going to go into my Necromancer Cloak. And for the pupils, I'm going to take a line straight up and down. If you go over outside the eye socket, that's okay. That is fine. I messed up, so I'll cover it up with some Spaceship exterior again on this eye. Did I do a Hulk video? I don't think I did. Because I mostly airbrushed him. What? He's sitting right here. But he's 90% airbrush, so I didn't actually do a video on him. Sorry. Alright, let's go try to correct this right eye. I'm making a mess of him. So flood the area with some paint, get a dry brush, and get it off there. This one eye is sure giving me a problem. You know what? I have an Army Painter Psycho here somewhere. Where is my Psycho brush? The Psycho's even finer. That's what I'm going to go with. I need some new Necromancer Cloak. That works for me. Alright, and what I'll do is I'm going to take my base tone flesh color, And I'm going to come back and touch up around the eyes and block them in that way. So if you make mistakes around the outside, it's okay. Cover it back up with your flesh tone. So I usually do my eyes before I highlight. But it's fixable. Still fixable. There we go. Grab just a touch of Elven Flesh to fix that cheekbone highlight on both sides. And we'll call that done. I know I was out of focus. I was intentionally out of focus so I could get close-ups. I'm back in focus now. Sorry about that. But yes, I had intentionally gone out of focus for a minute. So, I'm going to call that mini done. Yeah, I was doing a super fine detail. And so I was really having to get real close, so I'm sorry about it being off camera, but it was, with where my camera's set up, getting as close as I need to was really hard to do. But I'll have photos of this mini up on my Facebook page. I appreciate you all hanging around with me for a minute while I got back into the swing of streaming stuff. It's been a minute since I streamed, so glad to be back to doing it. I probably won't be streaming again until it... Can I show his face real quick? Yeah, give me a quick... give me a second. It's not perfect. These face sculpts on these guys are a bit tough to do. I usually do better faces, but... Hopefully that helps. Let me get it back in focus for down here. I don't use autofocus because it tends to focus on the wrong thing, so I have to manually focus everything. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more primed Critical Role minis. And then I have a whole nother box of them to do. So I don't know if I'll stream all of them. Here's the ones I've worked on. Maybe, hopefully you've seen them on my Facebook page. I've done a bunch of them already. They look great in the box painted once they're ready to go. So there's that. And then, like I said, if you're into any other miniature wargaming, I've done some Star Wars Legion stuff. I do some Crisis Protocol stuff. I have a bunch of Wild West Exodus on the way. A new game that I'm getting into. It looks like a ton of fun, so I'll be painting a bunch of lawmen from that. I'll probably be painting some bolt action here soon. I have some of this Cats and Catacombs to do for a customer. These are real unique. I did the dogs, Dungeon Doggies, I think it was called. I did the whole collection of those, so I've got the whole collection of this to do for a customer. I have plans this weekend. Maybe I'll stream Sunday night. Keep an eye out on the channel if you want to be notified of when I go live. Then hit the bell. If you like the video, do me a favor, hit the like button, the thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and check out some of the other videos. Like I said, I also have some on the Fifth Trooper Network that I do some how-to videos on there. So thanks for stopping on by. That's going to end tonight's stream. I've got to head off to bed. You've all been great. Get out there and paint some more minis.